Chapter 23. Back down in the parking lot, my family begins to fill me in on exactly what happened that morning when I was incommunicado, i.e., 6 feet under. They were all tending the grave sites when Junior and Nezzy got hungry. Actually, they both thought the women back making lunch at the church would let them sneak a taste of the food they were making. Assuming they'd find me back at the church, they all decided to call it a day and head downhill. Only when they got there, they couldn't find me. Then they walked to the back, only after Nezzy told me she and Junior did a walkabout through the kitchen to grab fry bread. Musham looked outside the back door and noticed that the medicine wheel garden, the one where Raph and I had our standoff, was completely trampled. When Grandma saw this, they looked at each other and, with me nowhere to be seen, sensed trouble. Tearing out from the church's back door, Junior led the pack with everyone else following closely behind. They bounded up the path, knowing they'd find me as they heard Raph yelling at me. Junior was the first to crest the hill. He saw Carl's son edging in closer to me, and he saw me jab Raph in the elbow and fly around him, again leaping into space. I must have hit my head when I fell into the grave, and it knocked me out. Just as the rest of my family reached the top of the hill, they witnessed my grand leap. Grandpa grabbed Raph's hunting rifle, and Junior pinned his arms back. Grandma ran back down the hill to call the police. Nezzy informs me, in a whisper, that she kicked Raph. Where the sun don't shine. Teamwork is what it's really all about, people. Amazingly, this only takes place within a matter of minutes, but to me it was a lifetime. My lifetime. You might call me crazy, and you wouldn't be the first. But looking back now, I can honestly say that I'm slightly grateful for what Carl and his kid did to me. It took me a few days to feel this way, though, after the shock wore off. I said you might think I'm crazy, but hear me out. Before this happened, I was afraid, petrified, to go visit my mom's grave. Any grave. My kukum, my grandma, is forever saying that everything happens for a reason. Raph drove me, like a team of wild horses, up the path to see my mother. Carl's kid, in his own weird, twisted way, gave me my mother. Don't get me wrong, he broke the law and will have to pay for that. And there is also a moral debt he will have to repay. But out of tragedy came a blessing. If not for his actions, I would never have seen my mother, my most gracious advocate, who showed me through my dreams where she has been all my life. Right beside me all along. I just needed to open my heart to see it. One of the police officers just happened to be preparing for funeral traffic control down the road from the church. So within seconds after Grandma called 911, we had backup. 10-4, good buddy. While all this was happening, Junior ran over to the edge of the grave, my grave, and reached down to pull me up. Wait, isn't that ironic? Me, an Indian, taking over and occupying land that I didn't own and settling in, claiming it for a while, even if it was a grave. Sorry, settler land stealing sidebar. Little Nezzy stuck close to Junior, and in her own little way offered the best of what she had. Bread. Fry bread. Bang. Of course. My neurotic self heard. Bang. Don't judge me, people, unless you've lain in a grave before your time. You too might misinterpret what you see and hear. And you know what? Spending some quality time in that grave makes me realize that cemeteries aren't that bad of a place. Come to think of it, they're actually a place of life. Just a different life that we can't see. I think I'll still tiptoe through them, though, and think light thoughts. A large round of hugs follows. Grandma and Grandpa have the paramedics who were called by the police check me out at the gravesite to make sure I am safe and sound. I'm a bit shaken, but surprisingly, not too bad. As the tribal police lead Raph away in handcuffs, he stops, turns back, and holds my gaze. But it's Carl who speaks. He never meant you no harm. It's You look so much like her. My mind got mixed up, and Raph, never would have harmed or stolen from you." "Carl, that's enough for today," Grandma interrupted, when she turns away from me and says something to him quietly. It must have been powerful, because he looks at her and nods solemnly, but I can't make out what she said. "Grandma, what did you say to him?" "Say? Well, I asked him, 'Isn't your wife allergic to daisies?'" And she tilts her head as she looks at me. "Okay. So, not to be rude, but what does that have to do with anything?" "See, Apple, sometimes questions help people see better, see themselves better, more clearly. And dear Carl needs that desperately now. He'll also have to help his son see himself better, too." Nodding in agreement, I answer, "I get that, but what's the deal with daisies?" "Carl's wife's favorite flowers are roses, red ones if I remember right." And she lit points over my shoulders. She and I are the only ones still at the cemetery hill. The rest have followed the police back down to the church. I look again at her just as she smoochy lips one more time. I turn my head to see what she's referring to. Just in back of me is the fresh grave I fell into. So, following her lip pointing, I make my way back to the open grave and think that maybe I left something back there, like my dignity. Standing right in front of it, I peer down to see what she's talking about. As I turn to ask her, she's gone. Back down the path to the church, I'm assuming. I'm just about to head back myself, but glancing to the left of the grave I fell into, I see it. Now I know what she was pointing to. It's my mother's grave, and it's 3 feet from me. I cradle my head in my hands and draw in a breath. It's the breath from deep within my soul, and I go to see my mother. Her grave marker is a humble one. It's made of speckled black and gray marble with a simple memorial carved into its face. It reads, "Marion Bernadette St. Pierre Starkington, 1968 to 1996. Here lies a beautiful soul. Wife, mother, daughter, friend, teacher." Just under her name is a flower. I bend to take a closer look, and I can see that it's a picture of a daisy etched in the stone. A daisy? But that's what Grandma said to Carl. And that was also in the little garden lesson Grandpa told me. So she will be explaining the weird question thing. She will be explaining the weird question thing she did back there. And now I touch my gold necklace my dad gave me and understand what it meant. There's a small engraved daisy on the front. Did Carl think this necklace would bring my mom's love to him? Is this what he wants back? But my dad gave this to me. My head is turning back and forth trying to figure out. No, trying to piece together the connection between what my grandma said. As my head glances back to the open grave where I fell, I notice something for the first time, and it redirects my thoughts. My mom's grave is to the left of where I was when I fell into the grave. I fell in to get away from Raph. It's to my left. In my dream, just a few hours ago, my mom was always to my left, and her kiss was even placed on my left cheek. Which means it truly was my mom who came to me in my graveside dreams. It wasn't just me having some weird blackout unconscious hallucination. It was my mother helping me, telling me that she was with me my entire life, and she was with me when I fell 6 feet under, to my left. It's so quiet up here, so peaceful. The lone sounds of a few cardinals and chickadees playing their songs. A few weeks ago, I asked Grandpa why my mom was buried up here in North Dakota instead of in Minnesota. After all, I said, my dad and I were in the Minneapolis metro area. Why wasn't she down there in Minnesota? Grandpa answered that at the time my mom died, my poor dad just couldn't take it. He was so grief-stricken that it pained him to even admit that my mom died. He asked my grandpa if Mom could be buried back in the Turtle Mountains, her beloved home. Dad knew that my relatives, could take better care of my mom up here. And it looks like they did. I know it may sound macabre or even creepy, but I do something next that I've always dreamed of doing. I lay down next to her headstone with my mother and drift off to a soul cleansing sleep. For those of you who have mothers, you take for granted something as simple as cuddling up with her and taking a nap. This is my own version of resting with my mom. Rest in peace, Mama. Rest in peace.